Every offseason, there are winners and there are losers. They're the franchises that make the correct moves to put their teams in the right position for the upcoming season, and there are the teams that take a hit and ultimately decline. These are the 7 teams that took the biggest hit in this year's NFL free agency. The 7 biggest losers. Before I give you my free agency losers, Gronk, spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL vids just like this, and comment your opinion on who you think were the biggest losers of this year's NFL free agency. Also, make sure you check out my free agency winners list, where I give you the 7 teams who I believe took a step forward this offseason. Let's kick off the free agency losers list at number 7 with the Vikings. Now, this was not an easy choice. There were not a lot of straight up losers this free agency, and I don't think the Vikings completely failed their offseason. But I will say this, for a team that is in supposed win now mode, they didn't really do anything to improve their team right now. They lost a key part of their offense in Stephon Diggs, and I know that the Vikings fans are going to counter this by saying he was a cancer. And I understand that he didn't really get along with Kirk Cousins as well as he probably should have, but he's an excellent receiver on the field. And you lose one of your best route runners really in all of football and the best deep threat on your offense. Minnesota did receive great compensation for Diggs, but does that really help the team right now? Does that help the team for 2020? No, not really. Outside of possibly that first round pick. Now, losing Josh Klein is not a massive loss, but he was a starter on your offensive line, and they haven't really replaced him yet. For a team with offensive line issues over the past few years, that's not exactly ideal. Edge rusher Stephen Weatherly is kind of an under-the-radar loss for Minnesota. He's a good depth pass rusher, but you're really tight against the cap, and that's the type of player you just can't afford when you're tight against the cap. This loss would really sting big time if they somehow also were to lose Everson Griffin. And then you look at the secondary, and if anything is for sure with the Vikings this offseason is that change is coming for the Vikings secondary. Minnesota let 3 of their top 4 corners on their roster from a year ago just straight up walk without a contract. Cornerback Mackenzie Alexander, who signed with the Bengals, Xavier Rhodes, who signed with the Colts, and Trey Waynes, who also signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. You let 2 of your depth safeties walk as well in Curse and Sendeo. The corners, I'm a little bit more worried about because yes, Rhodes was disappointing the last couple of years, and yes, Waynes was inconsistent, but all 3 of these guys are NFL starting caliber cornerbacks, and if you don't replace them, you can't just simply expect to walk into next season with a better secondary. If Zimmer is anything, though, I will say he's a very smart defensive coach. So we will see if he has it all figured out for that secondary in 2020. One great thing for Minnesota is that they will have back arguably the best safety tandem in all of football. So possibly they could really take the load off of that corner position, but I'm starting to be concerned about Minnesota going forward. At number 6, I have the Tennessee Titans, and coming into free agency, the Titans were in a difficult position. They unexpectedly made a run to the AFC Championship game in 2020 that I think even the people inside the Titans organization didn't expect that to happen. The front office had to kind of figure out how are they going to maintain some of those core pieces, but also at the same time don't get complacent and be able to find the right pieces to make the right moves. So the AFC Championship appearance all of a sudden put the Titans in position pre-free agency as a team that entered win now mode. But their execution, I don't think really allowed them to stay in that elite conversation in the AFC. Their number 1 priority, of course, they needed to bring back their quarterback. They needed to bring back Ryan Tannehill. Was he a little overpaid? Probably, but I think it was the right move. It also led to moving on from Marcus Mariota, who I think That was great for both sides. He ended up landing in Vegas, and that's going to be better for him and better for Tennessee. The number 2 priority, they needed to bring back Derrick Henry, their heart and soul of their offense, and they did that. But number 1 and number 2, Tannehill and Henry, meant that you probably couldn't pay your young stud right tackle Jack Conklin, and ultimately that's what happened. Now they did bring back backup tackle Dennis Kelly, who's a high-class backup and could start at right tackle this season. They certainly paid him like a starter, but he's certainly not Jack Conklin. I don't really understand how you only got a 7th for one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL in Jurrell Casey. I get that you want to open up that cap space for the future, but a 7? Like, he's probably not even going to make your roster at the end of the day. So that's 2 of your possibly top 5 players on your roster that are now gone in Casey and Conklin. They also lost a decent do-it-all backup running back in Dion Lewis and an underrated wide receiver in Tajay Sharp. They're not irreplaceable players by any means, but role players nonetheless. And it looks like Delanie Walker won't be back, or Wesley Woodyard, who are 2 players who have been staples for this team, for this fan base, for a long time. But that does make sense. You have to move on at some point, right? Last but certainly not least, Logan Ryan doesn't appear to be coming back to Tennessee. The jack-of-all-trades cornerback who is a leader of this defense will be finding a new home. Now, on the positive note, they did sign Vic Beasley, so the edge position is the one position I can say that Tennessee has upgraded. But it's odd. Typically, teams like the Titans, who make a surprising deep run in the playoffs, try to do it again with the same cast of players. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's hope that the Titans front office have the answers to these roster questions that arose this offseason. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Oh, Jacksonville, I warned you, I told you that Blake Bortles would be your demise, but unfortunately, you didn't realize until it was too late. The Jaguars are under a full-blown rebuild thanks to Mr. Bortles. And a big reason for that rebuild, they completely whiffed on Nick Foles. Ultimately, the organization had enough, and I get it. I mean, they just went into full-on, let's trade and get rid of everybody because we need cap space now. They traded Calais Campbell to Baltimore. They released Marcel Darius. They said goodbye to AJ Bouye, and now they're bracing for the departure of Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, wow, these are some big names, and these are some big blows for any team, especially one whose foundation was built on their defense for the last few seasons. Sure, they signed Joe Schobert, and I thought that Tyler Eifert, that was a solid signing as well, but the Jags are big-time losers for the simple reason that so many talented players, they're gone, and they really didn't receive anything of value in return. At number 4, the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, they're in transition. They made a lot of moves, as many moves of quantity as anybody, but the quality, I feel, is a little low. They did Cam Newton dirty, and that doesn't sit well by me. If you're going to release your star quarterback who won an MVP and took you to a Super Bowl, why wouldn't you do it a little bit earlier in the offseason so he has a chance to actually find a new team before everyone else gets signed and takes all the spots? I mean, he was a top 10 quarterback. He was an elite caliber quarterback for pretty much his entire Panther career. And when healthy, he gave the Panthers a chance to win any game. Sorry, but Teddy Bridgewater is not Cam Newton for Carolina. If anything gives away the fact that Carolina won't be competing anytime soon, it's that Greg Olsen said goodbye to Carolina and said hello to Seattle, a place that he feels has an actual chance to win a Super Bowl, and that place is not Carolina. Many would argue that they actually lost the trade with the Chargers between Turner and Okung, trading a young guard for an older tackle. And I don't really understand trading for an older tackle when the rest of your team is young and you're trying to build a young core of players. Not retaining Greg Van Roten was questionable to me. Darrell Williams left as well. So my question is, does this team even have a starting caliber guard? They have a big-time run stuffer hole now that Dontari Poe has gone to Dallas. Their leading pass rusher for the last, I don't know how long, Mario Addison, is also leaving. Vernon Butler had his best season ever and left to Buffalo as well. Bruce Irvin, another solid veteran pass rusher, gone to Seattle. The strength of Carolina last year was their pass rush, and it's all basically gone other than Burns and Short. Their best corner, who's still young, James Bradbury, left, and this secondary was already bad. Now they lose their best corner on their team last year, and that's going to be even worse. Thankfully, they did re-sign Trey Boston because Eric Reed is also out the door. I haven't even mentioned the fact that the best linebacker of the last decade has retired. Luke Kuechly is not coming through that door. This team will likely be one of the worst in football in 2020, and that's probably the most turnover of any roster in the entire NFL this offseason. I did like that they signed Robbie Anderson. I did like the Stephen Weatherly signing, but other than the wide receiver position itself, this team got worse at quarterback, tight end, offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, safety, and corner. That's just wow. The Houston Texans. If I knew what Billy O'Brien was doing, and I knew what he was going to do with his trades and his signings, I think I would be a billionaire. This guy is a complete wild card. And I do think that he has gotten a little bit too much hate, but at the same time, Billy O, what are you doing? I want to ask you, what did they actually really lose? Like, tell me. In terms of important pieces, they lost two players. They lost DeAndre Hopkins, great receiver, and they lost DJ Reader, great interior defensive lineman. But other than that, I mean, Carlos Hyde is gone. Okay, cool. He rushed for 1,000 yards, but he's Carlos Hyde. And David Johnson is coming from Arizona in part due to that Hopkins trade. So David Johnson's more talented than Carlos Hyde. He's also better as a receiver. So I'd say that's an upgrade. 1,000-year-old Jonathan Joseph is gone. Adai is gone, Mingo is gone, Mike Adams. Okay, those guys are depth guys at best or old players that are retiring. I think what's most disappointing with the Texans, and this is why they are a loser to me more so than anything else, is the fact that they had a lot of money coming into free agency, but they spent basically none of it, and they didn't make any moves to make this team a better team for 2020. When they were in the divisional round last year, they have Deshaun Watson, and I understand that you're looking to the future to pay Deshaun, but I just don't know. I don't get everything that they're doing here. Was the Hopkins trade a good one? No, it was not. It's not smart to mix feelings in football, but they did sign Randall Cobb. They did trade for Brandon Cooks, and overall, despite the potential concussion issues down the line, I like that trade. I like the speed they have at wide receiver. I still think they have a very talented offense. But honestly, I just don't understand what they're trying to do with their defense. Their defense last year was horrible, like horrendous, like snuck under the radar for how bad they were. Timmy Jernigan filling in for DJ Reader is okay, but they did absolutely nothing to improve their secondary. They did absolutely nothing to improve their defensive line and their pass rushers surrounding JJ Watt. So ultimately, Houston, I'm just mostly disappointed. At number 2, the LA Rams. The Rams are an example of a franchise who just don't know how to say no. They don't have a plan. In other words, they paid everybody, like literally everyone. And in the NFL, you cannot pay everyone. This offseason for the Rams is a result of the Rams not saying no. The LA Rams this offseason alone lost running back Todd Gurley, edge rusher Dante Fowler, the best edge rusher on their team with 11.5 sacks in 2019, linebacker Corey Littleton, the best linebacker on their team, Clay Matthews, their second best linebacker, Nicole Roby-Coleman, the starting slot corner on their roster last year, Eric Weddle, who retired, their starting safety, Greg Zuerlein, their kicker, and wide receiver Brandon Cooks. They were fortunate to get at least Brockers back on the defensive line, and yes, they re-signed Whitworth, so that's good. Although 3 years for Whitworth, isn't he like 40? Leonard Floyd is okay, but he's not as good as Fowler, and I thought that Robinson was actually a decent signing on the defensive line. So they improved their defensive line with Robinson, but nothing else. I mean, they got worse at wide receiver, running back, edge, linebacker, safety, and corner. And they really didn't do anything to improve their offensive line, which was maybe their biggest weakness last year. And oh yeah, this team doesn't even have a first-round pick this season. And at number 1, the biggest loser of free agency, unfortunately, is the Patriots. The Patriots take the crown for the biggest losers of free agency, and there is one simple reason. They lost Tom Brady. I mean, they lost the greatest player ever, their best player in franchise history, and the biggest draw in the NFL today. And most importantly, more even than wins and losses, they're easily the team to lose the most relevance. Will the Patriots brand ever be where it was pre-Brady? No, they won't. But will it regularly be on Sunday Night Football, hosting primetime games, having the guy who sells the most merchandise, formulates the most buzz in the media, generates the most new fans, and collects the most attention for an organization? No. Tom Brady was that guy, and he is gone. And that's a big deal from a business perspective, and that's a huge part of free agency, signing players that help your team sell tickets. And to top it all off, the Patriots are no longer a Super Bowl contender. So they lost Tom Brady. We all understand how important that is. But it isn't just Tom Brady, which completely stinks. I will say that nobody is irreplaceable like Tom Brady on this roster, but still, losing Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, Deron Harmon, Danny Shelton, Landon Roberts, and their kicker since 2006, Steven Gostkowski, that's not exactly ideal, especially considering they were the best defense last year and they lost important pieces of that defense. Is New England dead in the water? No. They still have a talented offensive line, still a top-notch defense, and the greatest coach ever. But are they what they were? No. I believe those days are over, at least for now. Hope you enjoyed the top 7 free agency losers of the 2020 NFL offseason. If you did, Gronk spike the like button and subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this. And don't forget to go watch the top 7 biggest winners of this free agency. Peace.